Hey guys, real fast. What is enhanced stand your ground law? Why is it so important that we pass it here in Indiana? Here's some facts. Indiana already has stand your ground law, but our laws are weak. So right now, if a Hoosier uses a firearm in a self-defense situation, in the eyes of the law, we're automatically presumed guilty, forcing us to prove our innocence in court. That's backwards. And with Soros-funded prosecutors taking up office all across the country and here in Indiana, it puts us in grave danger as gun owners. We're going to fix that with enhanced stand your ground law. We're also going to deal with how and when we can use stand your ground law. Right now, it only really happens on an appeal after your life has been ruined by a liberal prosecutor. We're going to address that with this law as well. Guys, it's a big lift, but we must do it for Hoosiers. Get involved in our fight today. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the Indiana Firearms Coalition. I want to break down more about what this bill is, how it works, and why we need it right now here in Indiana. A lot of you may be thinking to yourself, well, I'm pretty sure we've got stand your ground law on the books, and it's true. As I said before, we do have stand your ground law in effect. The problem is that current law begins with the assumption that you and I are guilty anytime there is a self-defense shooting here in Indiana. And so when you have to use that firearm in a self-defense situation and the cops arrive and they see a guy on the ground, dead or wounded, and they see you, the gun owner, with your firearm, hopefully it's back in your holster at that point, from the very beginning, you're presumed guilty. But this is America, right? And we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. It doesn't work that way in self-defense situations here in the Hoosier State. And what that means then is that county prosecutors, they hold all the cards following one of these situations. They have the money, they have the time, and they have the manpower to go after you with everything they've got. And then they can either A, get a conviction in court, or B, more often wear you down and bankrupt you and force you to surrender to a plea agreement, which still ruins your life and puts you in prison. That's backwards. That should not be allowed to happen here in America. And in dozens of other states, it doesn't. In dozens of states, they have enhanced stand your ground law. And this is not just red states. You've got places like Florida and places like California. You've got East Coast, West Coast, red states, blue states. Dozens of them have enhanced stand your ground law where they give the blanket presumption of innocence to everybody who alleges justifiable use of force after a shooting. What that means then is the state, in this case, the county prosecutors, need to prove your guilt in court. You don't have to prove your innocence. They have to prove your guilt, and that gives more protection to gun owners. And if there might have been a time back in the day when that wasn't really necessary, when prosecutors pursued justice, and for the most part, you'd be fine after a self-defense shooting. But those days are gone. Those days are gone. We all watched what happened with Mark McCloskey in Missouri. We watched Kenosha Kyle in Wisconsin, and we've seen the damage that woke liberal prosecutors, many times funded by George Soros, can do. And we have the same kind of woke liberal commie prosecutors right here. We got Ryan Mears in downtown Indy is the lead prosecutor, and he would love nothing more than to bury a gun owner in prison for the crime of self-defense. So item number one is to clarify that we are presumed innocent until the state can prove our guilt in a court of law. Number two, we're going to clarify that protection also includes the threatened use of force. Mark McCloskey shot nobody. Kyle Rittenhouse was forced to shoot people. But we have to be clear on this in the code that it's not brandishing just because you point a firearm at a thug. There is justifiable cases where you must do that. That's the outcome we want. We don't want to have to shoot anybody, right? We want the suspect, the thug, the criminal to see our firearm and run. And when he runs, the law should protect us for justifiably brandishing that firearm, not the criminal who was trying to rob or kill us. That's going to be item number two. Number three, we must clarify in vivid detail exactly how and when a gun owner can be arrested following a use of force situation. What happens more often than not is after a shooting, the cops arrive, there's a guy on the ground, dead or alive. There's a gun owner over here with a firearm. Hopefully it's back in your holster at that point. And in their mind, in many cases, well, someone shot Someone's got the gun. Somebody has to be arrested, and you're arrested just because. We're going to clarify in the code that there must be probable cause that you broke the law before you can be arrested. This is not just like an inconvenience, because here's how this works. When you're arrested following a use of force shooting, just ask a cop or ask a military veteran. After you've shot somebody in real life, your body experiences an adrenaline dump like you cannot possibly imagine. And the reality is that if you're being questioned by a bunch of aggressive Ryan Mears style prosecutors right after a shooting, your mind is racing 100 miles an hour on that adrenaline. And you might very easily say things that your lawyer would not want you to say, not because you're trying to hide the facts, but because you're not thinking clearly. And that's the downside to our current law. By letting you be arrested just because, it is much easier for liberal prosecutors to make a BS case against you that can bury you down the road. We're going to clarify that. And finally, we need to make it very clear how and when we can invoke stand your ground law in the state. Right now, in many cases, for the most part, you only can invoke stand your ground law on an appeal. And what that means, very self-evident. This is after you're convicted. You're a convicted murderer, or maybe of attempted murder. Your entire neighborhood, your friends, your coworkers, they think you're a murderer. Your marriage is hanging on by a thread. You're bankrupt. Your life is basically over. And then from that weakened position, you're expected to invoke stand your ground law and find the money to do that and try to appeal the entire conviction. That also is crap. What we want to do with this legislation is clarify that you have the right to go before a judge with your lawyers before you go through a 12 to 24 month long process of a criminal trial and say, Your Honor, our client stipulates that he did shoot that guy. Here's the reason why he shot that guy. This case is clearly a justifiable use of force. We are asserting stand your ground law up front, and we're asking the judge to dismiss the case. And if the judge agrees, you walk. That's it. Game over. He might not, but if he does, you're spared the agony of that criminal trial. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you, certainly I, watched the Kyle Rittenhouse case very closely. And I watched when that decision was handed down from the jury when he was declared not guilty. And if you watched it, you saw Kyle collapse immediately into his chair, bawling his eyes out as the waves of relief washed over his body. Because until that very moment, he was bracing for decades and decades and decades in prison. Again, that should not happen. In cases of clear self-defense, justifiable uses of force, you should never have to be run through the ringer like that by a piece of trash, woke county prosecutor. This bill is going to clarify that and give us the option to assert those protections pre-trial. Guys, it's a big lift. But again, George Soros is backing county prosecutor races all across America and right here in Indiana more and more and more. We must pass this bill to protect gun owners, protect Hoosiers from these prosecutors who, again, are not pursuing justice. They're pursuing a political ideology, guys. Get involved in our fight. Hit up our website for more information. And guys, as always, we'll keep you informed. Take care.